It is the ultimate nightmare. It is not about getting caught. It is not about the handcuffs, the steel bars, or the years stripping away in a grey cell. The nightmare is simpler than that. Imagine sitting in a prison cell, watching the news. You see the price of Bitcoin climbing. And climbing. In climbing. Know that somewhere, on a piece of hardware you own, sits a fortune. Not a few £1,000s. We are talking about 53 million euros. You are the richest man in the prison. Technically, you have enough money to buy the prison, tear it down, and build a mansion on the rubble. But you can't spend a penny of it. Not because the police froze the account, not because the banks locked you out, but because of a fishing rod. This is the story of Clifton Collins. A man who built a drug empire not with violence, but with digital foresight. A man who sat on a fortune larger than most lottery winners could dream of. And a man who lost it all, every single cent, because of a bit of spring cleaning. This is how a plastic tube, a landfill site, and a single memory lapse burned 53 million in dirty money. To understand the scale of this mistake, we have to understand the man. And Clifton Collins does not fit the profile. When you think of a drug lord dealing in tens of millions, you think of the cartels. You think of Manchester gangsters with balaclavas and encrochat handles. You think of flashy cars, gold chains and violence spilling out onto the high streets. Clifton Collins was none of that. He was a ghost, living in Crumlin, and later in the quiet, windswept rural landscapes of County Galway. Collins was originally a security guard. He was unassuming, quiet. The type of man you would walk past in the supermarket and forget before you would even reach the checkout. But behind the quiet demeanor, Collins was an operator. He had realized early on that the old way of doing business, hand-to-hand transactions on street corners, was dangerous. It was messy. It left a trail. So he turned to the green. Cannabis. In the mid-2000s, Collins was not just a street dealer. He was a grower. He rented properties in the countryside, far away from the prying eyes of the neighbors and the CCTV cameras of the city. He set up sophisticated grow houses. These were not amateur setups in a loft. These were industrial-grade production lines. Heat lamps, ventilation, irrigation. He was producing high-grade crop, and he was moving it fast. The money started rolling in. Cash. Dirty, bulky, physical cash. And this is where every drug dealer runs into the problem. The problem is simple. Cash is heavy. Cash smells. Cash takes up space. You can't walk into a bank with a bin bag full of 20s and ask for a savings account. You have to hide it. You have to bury it. You have to launder it. But Clifton Collins was smarter than the average criminal. Or so he thought. He was watching the internet. He was watching the rise of a new, strange digital token that the underworld was starting to whisper about. Bitcoin. Ideally, Collins wanted to wash his hands of the physical cash. Around 2011 and 2012, while most of the world dismissed cryptocurrency as a nerd's fantasy, Collins began buying. He was using the cash from his grass crops to buy Bitcoin when it was trading for practically nothing. Maybe a few dollars a coin. He was not just laundering money. He was investing. Over the years, as his crop grew, so did his digital wallet. He accumulated 6,000 Bitcoin. Let that sink in. 6,000. As the years ticked by, the value of that stash began to warp reality. The few thousand euros of drug money he put in turned into hundreds of thousands. Then millions. By 2017, Collins was not just a cannabis grower anymore. On paper, he was a tycoon. But having that much money brings paranoia. Collins knew that if the police ever raided him, they would look for cash. They would look for bank accounts. But crypto was supposed to be untouchable. Invisible. However, the security of Bitcoin relies on one thing. The private key. For those who do not know, a Bitcoin wallet is like a digital safe. The private key is the combination to that safe. It usually comes in the form of a 12 or 24-word seed phrase. A random string of words like horse battery, staple, correct, and so on. If you have those words, you can access the money from anywhere in the world. If you lose those words, the money is gone. It still exists on the blockchain, staring at you, but it is mathematically impossible to touch. It is frozen in digital amber forever. Collins was terrified of hackers. He was terrified of the police finding a digital file on his computer labeled passwords. So he decided to go analog. He took his fortune, all 6,000 Bitcoin, and split it across 12 separate accounts. 500 Bitcoin in each. To protect them, he wrote the seed phrases down on a piece of paper. Just as simple, a 4-sheet. But where do you hide a piece of paper worth 50 million? Under the mattress? In a safe? Taped to the back of a painting? Too cliché. Too easy to find during a raid. Collins had a hobby. He liked fishing. He had a lot of gear. Rods, tackle boxes, nets. He took the piece of paper with the codes. He rolled it up tight, and he shoved it inside the aluminum cap of his favorite fishing rod case. It was, in his mind, the perfect hiding spot. Who looks inside the cap of a fishing rod case? It was genius. It was secure. It was his retirement fund. Sitting in the corner of a rented house in far north County Galway, he had the money. He had the plan. He had the hiding spot. And then, he made a mistake. It was not a rival gang that took him down. It was not a high-tech police surveillance operation involving the MI5. It was a traffic stop. In 2017, Collins was driving his car. He looked a bit suspicious. The Garda pulled him over. A routine check. They found a small amount of cannabis in the car. That gave them probable cause. That led them to the house in Farnort. When they opened the door, the smell hit them. They found the grow house. Plants worth roughly 400,000 euros. It was a serious bust, certainly prison time. But for Collins, the weed was just the side hustle now. The main event was the fishing rod. Collins was arrested. He was taken into custody, and this is where the timeline splits, and the tragedy begins. Collins is sitting in a cell. He is likely thinking, okay, I will do a few years. I will keep my mouth shut. When I get out, I grab the fishing rod. I flee to a non-extradition country, and I live like a king. But while Collins was sitting in that cell, life on the outside went on. He had been renting the house in Galway. When a tenant goes to prison for running a drug factory, the landlord tends to want their property back. The landlord entered the property. He saw the mess. The police had taken the evidence, the plants, the lights, the computers, but they had left the junk. The house was cluttered. The landlord hired a clearance crew, men with vans and shovels. Their job was simple: clear the house. Get it ready for the next tenant. They went room to room, grabbing old clothes, rubbish, cheap furniture, and fishing gear. They picked up the rod case. To them, it was just old plastic. Maybe it was broken. Maybe it smelled. It did not matter. They did not check inside the cap. Why would they? They threw it into the back of a van. They drove to a waste transfer station, and they threw it into a skip. From there, the rubbish was taken to a landfill, or perhaps an incinerator. The exact destination is a matter of debate, but the result is the same. The piece of paper, rolled up tight inside that aluminium tube, was buried under tons of Irish refuse. Collins, sitting in his cell, had no idea. Meanwhile, the Criminal Assets Bureau CAB was investigating Collins' finances. They knew he was a dealer. They found traces of his crypto activity. Collins, realizing the game was up and perhaps hoping for leniency, or perhaps just crushed by the weight of the secret, eventually told them about the Bitcoin. He admitted he had the fortune. The police were stunned. They checked the blockchain, the wallets were there, they could see them on the public ledger. 12 accounts. 6,000 Bitcoin. At the time of the investigation, the value was fluctuating wildly, but it hit peaks of over 50 million euros. Today, it would be worth hundreds of millions. The police had the hardware wallets, the physical USB sticks which they had seized during the raid. But without the seed phrases, those USB sticks were just useless plastic. They asked Collins, where are the codes? Collins told them. In the fishing rod case, the police checked the evidence locker. No fishing rod. They had not seized it. It was not evidence, it was just junk. Collins' heart must have stopped. He contacted the landlord. He contacted the clearance crew. The story came out. The landfill. The rubbish tip in County Meath, or Galway. Some reports suggest waste from that site is shipped to Germany and China to be incinerated. Other reports say it is buried deep underground. The realization hit everyone at once. The money was gone. The Criminal Assets Bureau confiscated the accounts. Technically, the state of Ireland now owns those 12 wallets. They have the public addresses. They can look at the balance on a screen. But they cannot withdraw it. Nobody can. Clifton Collins was sentenced to 5 years in prison for the drugs. But the real sentence was not the time. The real sentence was the knowledge. Imagine sitting in that cell, night after night. You close your eyes and you see the fishing rod. You see the clearance men picking it up. You see it flying through the air into the skip. You replay the moment you decided to hide it there. You replay the moment you decided not to memorize the words. You replay the moment you decided not to make a copy. One silly mistake. One decision to trust a piece of plastic instead of your own brain. Collins lost his freedom. But worse, he lost the ability to ever be free again. Even when he walks out of prison, he walks out a pauper. The millions are there, floating in the digital ether, taunting him forever. In the end, Clifton Collins achieved the ultimate security for his Bitcoin. He made it so secure that not even he could steal it. He became the only man in history to effectively donate 50 million euros to the concept of scarcity. A brutal lesson from the underworld. You can hide from the police, you can hide from the gangs, but you can't hide from the garbage man. That is the story of the most expensive fishing trip in history. It is a reminder that in the world of high-stakes crime, the biggest threat is not always a gun. Sometimes it is just bad logistics. What do you think? Is there a chance Collins is lying? Is the fishing rod story a masterstroke to hide the money until he is truly clear of the authorities? Or is this the single most painful mistake ever made by a criminal? Let me know in the comments below. If you enjoyed this deep dive into the stupidity of the criminal underworld, make sure you hit that subscribe button. We have got more stories of botched hits, arrogant gangsters, and billion-pound failures coming up next. This is UK Crime Documentaries. Stay safe and check your pockets.